Welcome to my lecture recital. My name is Penny. I'm going to talk about the performance practice issues on playing Bach, Chaconne BWV 1004. And I'm going to start with what is a Chaconne? I hope you can see the screen. Okay, a Chaconne is a dance movement. Usually it's in triple meter, and possibly it was usually performed at quite lively tempo, let's just say it that way, instead of brisk tempo. You don't want to play too fast because people want to dance with it. Chaconne originated is from Spain, in the popular culture in Spain during the late 16th century, and the earliest French and Italian examples from the earliest French and Italian examples are from the 17th century. Usually in the Chaconne we have a repeated bass line. What happened was that originally in Spain the Chaconne is accompanied by guitar, and eventually the guitar line sort of becomes the repeated bass line when they move on to France and move on to Italy. Usually the Chaconne has 3 sections. Frequently it's in major, minor, major. It's not always in this, keys, but most likely is in major, minor, major. And Chaconne is placed at the conclusion of a suite or sonata set. So in the Baroque suite, usually you will have Allemand, you have Courante, then Sarabande, then you have Jig, then you have Chaconne, if you have a Chaconne at the end. Now goes to the music we're going to talk today, which is Bach Chaconne. The Bach Chaconne is the last movement of the partita in D minor for violin solo. And on the score, it's actually written in the Italian term, which is Chaconne, but commonly known as Chaconne in French. The key setting for this particular Chaconne is different than the traditional one, which is in minor, major, minor, instead of major, minor, major. The rhythm is followed by the French tradition of dotted rhythms, so you will have 1 and 2 and 3 and 1, 2 and 3 and 1. So you have long, short, long, long, short, long, that kind of traditional dotted rhythm. It has a long chain of variations, mostly consists of 4 bar units. When you say the 4 bar units, or we can say like a subject. And sorry, let me go to my note here. The subject can be served as the repeated bass line, or it could be served as a harmonic progression. So sometimes you will hear that the subject really clearly, but sometimes it's kind of like disappear in the harmonic progression. The accent falls on the second beat, which is the tradition characteristic of the Chaconne. I'm sorry. There's no tempo indication on Bach's score, but remember, if you remember what I said earlier about the tempo supposed to be somewhat lively, somewhat a little fast, but not too fast. But in this particular Chaconne, it's actually rather slow because the harmonic rhythm it's a little more complicated. And so when you have a virtuosic writing, usually the dance character just sort of disappeared. So that's what's happening in this Chaconne. The basis of this particular Chaconne is the bass line D, C sharp, D, B flat, and A, which is a variant of the traditional descending tetrachord. The tetrachord is supposed to be D, C sharp, B flat, and A. But if you have D and C sharp goes to B flat, there's augmented second interval, which is prohibited during that time for the theory perspective. So instead of Bach wrote, go back to D, then you have B flat, so it sounds a little more smooth. In order to perform this chaconne, it's probably better to keep a little bit steady tempo, not too fast, and a little light stress on the second beat, because we talk about, the accent falls on the second beat, which is the characteristic of the chaconne. So this is the facsimile for the autograph of the Bach chaconne, and I square that big chord because we're going to talk about that later. Originally, I want to have like a CD example of this piece, but there were some issues with the copyright. So I'm very honored to have my colleague Irene Xiao, the violinist, to play. I think it's way better than a CD. And so she's going to play the subject, the first 8 bars of the Bach chaconne for you. So you can see it's actually a very virtuosic piece, very standard repertoire for violinists to learn. With that big chords, the one that I circle, it's impossible to play all the notes at the same time on the violin because the nature of the instrument is impossible to do that. So they have to break it up, sort of sound like arpeggio, which is sometimes become a little problem when we play the transcription. That I will be talking details later. This particular chaconne is a really famous piece. A lot of musicians, composers, they like to take it as the theme and then they will transcribe it to different instruments. So I'm going to put out some examples, such as on the piano we have Busoni and Brahms. Those 2 composers' transcription are the one I will be playing for you today. And also by Mendelssohn and Schumann, but what they did was they add the piano accompaniment to the original chaconne. And also we have the forehand and many different piano transcriptions out there. For guitar, we have Antonio Sinopoli. For organ, we have at least 3 different transcriptions. The 2 best known are by William T. Best and Ulysses Mate. For the orchestral transcription, the famous one is by Leopold Stokowski, and of course there's for bassoon. The interesting one is in 2002, the harpsichordist, the Danish harpsichordist, Lars Mortensen, he transcribed the D chaconne, D minor chaconne, to harpsichord, but in A minor. So the first time in the history, the D minor chaconne is being transposed to A minor. There's some other odd adoption to other instruments, such as by cello, by flute, marimba, lute, clarinet. Carillon is actually really interested if you watch YouTube. Electric bass guitar, which is kind of fun to watch. Japanese tsukaru shamisen, which is actually kind of like a long neck guitar and played by a pack. Panpipes, and it is really interesting to see too. And the most interesting one is the Casio VX4. If you search on the YouTube, you see the really weird digital sound playing the Bach chaconne, which is kind of cute, but somebody is willing to put time to do that. It's quite a dedication. Now, since I'm going to talk about the performance practice issues, and so I will be starting with the general performance practice issues. Remember we talked about that big chord on the screen, that big red circle, squares. That, coming to this performance practice issue that we need to talk about. First, our chords, whose highest and lowest notes span a range too large to be played simultaneously on the violin, arpeggiated on the piano, an instrument that fully capable to play all the notes simultaneously? Can we do that? Should we play arpeggiated on the piano, or should we play all together? And also, second point, the lack of written dynamics in Baroque music, musical sources, has always been a performance practice issue. Both Busoni and Brahms provided dynamics marking in their versions as such indication, evidence of an authentic performance tradition that we need to think about. Starting from 1843, the violinist Ferdinand David published the first edition with fingerings and bowing according to his taste. And afterwards, there's about odd 40 editions, about this Chaconne, but the composers or the violinists will put their own slurs, their own dynamics markings, and that is kind of like, okay, that's according to 19th century taste. But did Busoni and Brahms follow this trend into their transcription? If so, to what degree? That we will also talk about. There are other performance practice issues such as tempo, pitch, overdotting, and temperament. Temperament right now, it's all equal temperament. Tempo-wise, we'll talk about it. Pitch is gonna be higher because we are playing on the modern piano. Overdotting, we'll talk in details. So the very first composer I'm gonna talk about is Brahms. Brahms loved Bach's music. He acquired the reputation of being an outstanding Bach player. I'm just pointing out to you how much he loves Bach music. An enthusiastic subscriber to the Leipzig Bach edition, he said, "Each volume is a new world for me." And he was found playing Goldberg variations with the tears streaming down after he learned of his mother's death. And when he was too ill to play, he still had the enjoyment of looking at the score. And he was actually reading the Bach motet during his last night of life. So it tells you how much Brahms loved Bach's music. Now, next one is a really important part of Brahms' approach to the early music, and that sort of influenced me how I am going to play this piece actually. So the funding of the Bach Gesellschaft in 1850 is a very important development in the music history. The founder, one of the four founders, was Brahms' really close friend, which is Robert Schumann. And so I'm sure that influenced him a lot too. During this time, there was two schools split into authentic playing or, evolution to the new music. The old conservative, I shouldn't say old, the conservative circle included Brahms, Clara Schumann, Mendelssohn in Berlin and Leipzig. And in the new German schools, the important figures are Franz Liszt, and Richard Wagner in Weimar. Now, what they argue, the point is both sides view Beethoven and Bach as the aesthetic hero. But in the more conservative circle, they think, Bach and Beethoven are unsurpassable. They are their pick, and that's it. That's the best music. But for the new German school, what they think is Bach and Beethoven are just the beginning of the new era. So there's this big difference. And till today, we still have that kind of different points of view in terms of playing Bach's music, which I see every day at the school where I teach. I have a very different view than another piano teacher on playing Bach music particularly. So for Brahms, his approach, since he's actually one of the center figures in this conservative circle, he thinks that when playing or performing Bach's music, it has to be more Baroque approach. So when he conduct the Bach cantatas or the Bach choral music, he will provide the continual realization to the keyboard, to the organ player. So he can have the full control of how the realization is supposed to be sounded, because he doesn't want it to sound too romantic-ish. So that actually gives a really clear point when you wanted to play Brahms' Bach transcription. You want to have an approach that is more close to the Baroque music instead of the 19th century romantic Wagner-ish music. Brahms' transcription, the title is actually says Study for Piano Forte number 5, and it's for left hand only and lasts about 14 minutes. Since it's a study for the piano forte, so obviously it's something I think he probably having in mind as a technique piece for the left hand, but it's more into it, which is come for the next slide. This music, his transcription is published in 1879. But in 1877, he sent the score to his dear friend Clara Schumann with a letter. He said, "The Chaconne is, in my opinion, one of the most wonderful and incomprehensible pieces of music. Using a technique adapted to a small instrument, the man writes a whole world of deepest thoughts and most powerful feeling. If I could picture myself writing or even conceiving such a piece, I'm certain that the extreme excitement and tension would have driven me mad. There is only one way in which I can secure undiluted joy from the piece, though on a small and only approximate scale, and that is when I play it with the left hand alone. The same difficulty, the nature of the technique, the rendering of the arpeggios, everything conspires to make me feel like a violinist." That comes with, so here is the score, Brahms' transcription. And you can see it's not a lot of notes and not a lot of expression marking or dynamics marking. I only circled 2 with the red brackets. So in his opinion, he doesn't want to have that really romantic, different kind of sound. So how do you suppose to play Brahms' transcription? When you see the chord that exceeds an octave, you're going to roll the chord just like how violin does. When you see the dotted rhythm, you're going to play as over dot, just as the traditional Baroque performance practice. What I did was that Brahms provided some slurs in the score, but I think it's more like a phrase marking. And what I did was that I transferred the original slurs from Bach's score to Brahms' score, and I think it sounded very different. So as a pianist, if you wanted to play this Brahms transcription, maybe you want to look at the original score, especially the slurs. Dynamics marking, not too much. Not too much. Why is that? Goes to the general Baroque violin styles. In the Baroque violin styles, you won't see a lot of dynamics contrast because instrument probably can't do that much because of the gut string. So the character of the Baroque style is that you will have more like stretch rhythm on the freedom of the rhythm, and then also you want to put a little stress on certain notes. So there's not a lot of the dynamic contrast. That goes to the pedal issue, because piano is a percussion instrument, which is very different than violin. On the violin, you can pretty much do legato, slur pretty easily, but on the piano, you probably need a little help from the pedal. But when you pedal through this piece, you need to pedal only a little bit, tap on it, or half of it, or sometimes quarter of it, and you have to change the pedal really fast according to the notes, because you don't want to give that full sound. The pedal in this case, in this piece, is not to enhance the sound. It's trying to connect the sound and make it more sound like a violin. Okay, so that being said and done, I'm gonna play the Brahms Bach Chaconne transcription for you. transcription from Brahms. Kind of hard to play, but I did it. Playing 15 minutes on Left Hand Alone is quite a challenge. Next composer I'm going to talk about is Busoni. Busoni is a big figure of the late 19th century, early 20th century composers with big sounds, very romantic sound. He certainly loves study Bach's music as well. And to the point he actually put a lot of dedication and analyzed and edited 2- and 3-part inventions and also the well-tempered clavier. Now, in these 2 editions, though, he used a lot of the piano pedals, including the sustain pedal, which is the middle one. That is a totally different point of view from a purist to perform the Baroque music. But in his thinking, he is actually more towards the new school. So he thought, actually I have a quote from his book, A New Aesthetic of Music, and he said about Bach and Beethoven, he said, therefore, Bach and Beethoven are to be conceived as beginning and not as unsurpassable finalities. So that says really clear which direction he's going. He's actually going more towards the point that the music has evolved since Bach's time. Bach is just the beginning. Although he said, the art of composition is descending in a straight line from that of Bach, so he really respects Bach's music, but in the interpretation-wise, he has different point of view. He actually wrote a lot of transcription based on Bach's music, and so to the point, people are attacking him, being not authentic or, too much of chords and harmony that he added in his transcription. People just not happy of his transcription, to the point that he has to stand up and defend his own point of view. What is a transcription about? This is his quotes. Every notation is in itself the transcription of an abstract idea. The instant the pen seizes it, the idea loses its original form. Second point, the fact that a transcription does not destroy the archetype, which is therefore not lost through transcription. He also said, I learned to recognize the truth that good and great universal music remains the same through whatever medium it is sounded. He, in his 2 books, The New Aesthetic of Music, and another one, it's called The Essence of Music. He has 2 different chapters devolving on defending himself. What is a transcription supposed to be? A transcription is supposed to be just you taking the theme from one of the composers, then you make it to another completely different piece. That's what he said. So when you're trying to play Busoni's music, think in mind, this is Busoni's music. It's not Bach's music. This is a score of the Busoni transcription. And he's very detailed, what he wanted to have, what he wanted the pianist to play. Very, very detailed. So right on the top, the big circle one, you might not be able to see it. He said, give me a second. He said, Andante maestoso ma non troppo lento. He wanted to be a walking tempo, not too slow, not too fast. Maestoso, like triumphantly, but not too slow. That's what he said. And on the second line, directly he says, Sempre molto energico, makes me say it's always forte, it's always loud, but energetically. So almost every single line, he has expression marking or dynamics marking. So he's very specific of how his music is supposed to be played. That goes on to the purpose practice issue. How do we play Busoni's music then? Remember when we talk about the chord that exceeded more than an octave, in Brahms transcription, you want to roll the chord so it sounded close to the violin. But when you're playing this piece on Busoni's transcription, you're not going to roll the chord. You're not going to arpeggiate the chord. You're just going to play the entire chord. And matter of fact, at least at 2 places inside the score, he said, particularly put a note underneath and say, no arpeggio. So that said it really clearly, when you see the chord, you're just not going to roll it. You want to emulate the sound of the full organ, so that means you're going to use the full pedal, which is very different than Brahms. When I was playing Brahms music, I tried not to push down the full pedal, although in the middle of section you do have to use the pedal because of the nature of the instrument. You do need to use the pedal, but I try not to use the full pedal and try to change the pedal frequently. But for Busoni's transcription, you want to use the pedal, not to say all the time, but a lot of time. Make the full sound from the piano as you can. And you just follow whatever the expression marking that he had, because he's very clear what he wants to have. So, that being said and done, I'm going to play Busoni's transcription for you. Is there any questions about the performance practice issues from you? Dr. Zapua, anybody? Yes.
First, thank you for a very good presentation.
Thank you.
As far as the Busoni goes, did he actually say that he was trying to emulate the organ?
Yes, he did. Well, because he also did a lot of transcriptions for the Bach organ. So actually, when he started to transcribe for Bach's music, was inspired by listening to one of the organ performance of the Bach work. And I should have memorized the name, but the musician sitting next to him said, "Why don't you transcribe a piano? Transcribe the same music to piano?" And then, so that's how he started all this transcription for Bach music. And so the organ was the very first instrument that he was trying, he had in mind when he was starting to transcribe the music.
So why didn't he just compose for organ?
It's still different sound because certainly from the organ sound it's very different than the piano sound because it's two different kinds of instrument. What you can achieve in the organ is not the same thing you can achieve on the piano.
But you said at the beginning he's telling the film that he wants to emulate the sound.
Perspectively, yes. But I think, in his mind, his favorite instrument is actually piano, and then so, he wants to have the sound from the piano.
Okay, back to the Brahms. I'm just curious, how many of the performance practice things that you referred to are in the score? Is your point that things like arpeggiation, tempo, pedaling, articulation, dynamics, are those things not written in the score?
You mean for Brahms music?
Yeah.
Yes, he did. For the tempo marking, actually, no, he doesn't have the tempo marking. So, but he does have a forte right at the beginning of the score. So he didn't give any tempo marking, just the same way as what Bach did. So, so that is sort of the same thing, that because he wanted to make it sound like a violin playing, and so he left pretty much a lot of room for the pianist to interpret his transcription, just the same thing as the Baroque the Bach Chaconne. So the pianists need to have enough performance practice knowledge before approach to this piano study, because he doesn't have a lot of expression marking. There's actually no expression marking either. It's only the tempo marking and a little bit of the pedal marking. It's a very clean score.
No articulation.
Excuse me?
No slurs or...
He does have a slur, but as I said earlier, it's more towards like a phrase, indication for the phrase instead of the articulation kind of slur.
Also, obviously, it's a curious thing that he's just from left hand. Can you hear anything?
Yeah, I'm trying.
What do you think the point is? Was the point for a left-hand piece to train the left hand to be able to play all the parts like that?
Well, this is actually, okay, so that is actually probably the very first thought is the technique. That's why he says a study for the pianoforte. So all these 5 numbers of piano studies is actually it's for technique piece. So this one is particularly for left hand, but also as what I mentioned earlier, he found out this is the only way to play as close as possible to the original instrument, which is violin. So that's why it's on left hand only, because
it's more difficult to bring out some of the voices.
it is
It's more
difficult.
with just one hand.
A lot difficult. Super difficult. But also on the other hand, because when you're playing a violin, a lot of times, all these sounds and string, whatever, it's on the left hand. So I think that's also the other reason why he wanted to do it on the left hand. So it makes him feel like he is a violinist himself when he played this piece himself.
All right, just one more question. You referred to
Yes.
Is what, solo bassoon?
It's a solo bassoon. It's a solo bassoon. Most of the transcriptions, besides Mendelssohn and Schumann, is actually adding the complement. And also for the orchestra piece, otherwise, obviously you have a lot of instruments. Other than that, it's only 4 solo instruments. Oh, there's actually one for 4 hands, but that is about it. It's also only for 1 instrument. Even for pinpipes, it's for 1 instrument. Thank you. I just want to say one more thing. I don't know if my teacher is still here. She probably left because she has to teach. But I just want to say I really appreciate my piano professor, Professor Blankenberg, and also my advisor, Dr. Zapula. And also I want to thank each one of you, sacrifice your lunch time, come here to listen to me talk and play. Thank you very much.